are okay. Hi, everyone. My name is Seville, and I'm the president of the Canadian Helpers Society. I'm going to host today's event. It's a pleasure to see so many of you here showing your support and interest in our programs. Thank you. We are here in the third event in the New Horizon for Seniors program, a series of our organizations called Understanding Mental Health with Emma Dingle. This session is funded by the federal government of Canada, and in today's sessions, we are going to talk about recognizing early signs and symptoms, practical exercises, and how to offer support and self-care techniques. And before giving the stage to our speaker, I would like to do territorial acknowledgement as we always do, and also introduce our speaker, Emma Dingle. I acknowledge that I'm located on the traditional territory of the neutral Anishinaabe and Haudenosaunee peoples. The region of Waterloo, which I'm located at the moment, is situated on the Haldimand Tract, land promised to the Six Nations that includes 6 miles on each side of the Grand River. We respect and honor the diverse histories, languages, and cultures of all Indigenous peoples who call this territory home. We are committed to moving forward in the spirit of reconciliation and collaboration. About Emma Dingle, our today's speaker, she is a young marketing and advocate at Women in Crisis, Algoma, a shelter supporting women fleeing domestic violence and abuse. She holds an honors bachelor's of global business and digital arts from the University of Waterloo, where she focused on postpartum mental health during her undergrad program. Emma is actively involved in supporting vulnerable populations, especially women and youth at risk, through workshops, training, and advocacy like this one. To make the best use of our time today, I'm excited to give the stage to Emma. Emma, over to you. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. It's nice to be back. I'm really looking forward to this session. I'm just going to share my screen and get my presentation up.
Good morning, Emma.
Good morning. Okay. Let me see here. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Yes, now we can see it.
Awesome. All right. Let me just... All right. So I guess we can get started. So today's session is about understanding mental health. It's the second session. So we'll just jump right in. So we're going to just be going through a couple of things that we touched on last presentation. For those who weren't here, this is just a recap of all the kind of things we discussed last time and just to set the scene for what we're going to be talking about this time. So I always like to start with a definition of what is mental health. So according to the World Mental Health Organization, mental health is a state of mental well-being that enables people to cope with the stresses of life, realize their abilities, learn and work well, and contribute to their community. So there's many definitions of mental health. Different organizations have different definitions, but I think this one captures best what most professionals and mental health experts see and believe mental health is. So it's your mental well-being, what's going on in your brain, in your head, your thoughts, and your ability to not only cope with your emotions, but how that plays into your every single day life. So when we talk about mental health and mental well-being, a lot of common misconceptions is that, you know, you have to be living with a mental health disorder to be struggling with mental health, and that's not necessarily the case or true. Mental health encapsulates kind of our overall thoughts, our well-being, and that is kind of our everyday, right? How our thoughts make us feel, how our emotions make us feel, how that plays into our work, our personal lives, our everyday lives. So mental health, especially in this context that we're talking about today, is just going to be how do we navigate our thoughts, navigate our emotions, and navigate how that plays out into our work life, our personal lives, and our relationships. So now we're going to talk about some early signs of mental health struggles. Now it's a long list, and we talked a little bit about this last time, because mental health can really affect everyone differently, based on your situation, based on your personal experiences. Mental health changes and fluctuations can look very different depending on what you do for work, what your family life is like, what you're struggling with. But I like to kind of touch on a variety of things. It might be one of these things on this list that you're struggling with, or you notice it might be all of the things on the list. But they're just here to kind of paint the picture of what some challenges could potentially look like. So the first is concentration and focus. For a lot of people who start to notice that their mental health is struggling a little bit, concentration and focus is a big one. So if you're at work, finding it difficult to focus on tasks, to complete tasks, when you're at home, finding it difficult to concentrate on one thing, a lot of people usually report when they're struggling with concentration and focus, just kind of like a general malaise or difficulty staying present. When you're struggling with kind of thoughts and feelings and emotions that are taking over your everyday life, concentration and focus can be something that hinders or shifts. The next is energy levels and fatigue, which is quite common when we go through difficult times, when we're dealing with heavy emotions, when there's struggles in our life. A lot of times we tend to feel tired because we're emotionally and mentally dealing with a lot. So our body starts to kind of feel fatigue. So a lot of people who are struggling with mental health, struggling with feeling overwhelmed and having negative thoughts and feelings, they're going to feel tired. This can look like maybe you are sleeping for longer periods of time than normal. Maybe you are finding yourself during the day very exhausted. This can also look like napping, for example, sleeping more than you normally would because you're physically feeling very tired. This is something to look out for because in our bodies and our nervous system, it's all connected. So when we're struggling mentally, that can have an effect on our bodies physically. The next is motivation, which is another very common thing. So when we're struggling with our mental health, when we start navigating and dealing with emotions and difficult times, challenges, we tend to lose motivation. This can look like you're finding it difficult to get out of bed in the morning. You're finding it difficult to execute everyday chores, everyday tasks. Your motivation is dwindling. A lot of times, again, when you have these big feelings and these big thoughts that are difficult to navigate, a lot of other things go out the window. So a lot of people find it difficult to find motivation to do the things that they need to do every day. And this can take an impact on our self-care, which is what we'll be talking about later. When we don't have the motivation to take care of ourselves, then other pieces of our life start to decline. So we'll talk about strategies a little bit later on, but that's just something to look out for. If your motivation to complete just simple everyday things starts to kind of fluctuate, it may be a sign that you're struggling with your mental health. The next is sleep patterns. This kind of ties hand in hand with fatigue. So a lot of times, as I was mentioned, with napping, with oversleeping or undersleeping, our sleep patterns can be very affected by our thoughts, our feelings, our mental health. Some people find that they're oversleeping, that they're sleeping 12, 14 hours a day, they're napping. But another change that you may notice with your mental health is that you're not sleeping enough. You're up late at night with thoughts. You're finding it difficult to turn your brain off, and you're not sleeping enough, which can have other impacts on your body, your mind, and your thoughts. So if you start to notice changes in your sleep patterns and you're dealing with negative thoughts or challenges, this could be a sign, again, that there's struggles with mental health there. Next is social interactions and isolation. a lot of times when we're feeling good, when our mental health is in a good place, we're having good thoughts and feelings, we want to be surrounded by people. We want to be with our friends. We want to be in a group or a community, or going to work is an exciting thing because you're going to be around people. But unfortunately, when we start to struggle with our mental health, a lot of people tend to isolate. They tend to withdraw. And if you're someone who is more of a social person who enjoys time with others, and when you're struggling, you start to find that you're withdrawing from those interactions. Again, these are signs that you may be struggling with your thoughts, your feelings, your mental health. The next is appetite and weight management. Now, again, our bodies are so connected. So when we're struggling mentally, this can have a huge impact on our appetite. Some people find when they're stressed, when they're overwhelmed, they're inclined to eat more. They are snacking and they're eating a lot of food. And other people find that their appetite goes away when they feel anxious or when they're feeling stressed. So they're not eating. So our mental health undeniably 100% has an impact on our appetite and how we eat. And a lot of people find that food can be a coping mechanism. So when you're struggling, you're having these negative emotions, food for a lot of people is comfort. So you might notice that your eating habits are changing. You're eating a lot more than normal. You're eating a lot less than normal. And naturally, because of that, you might find fluctuations in your weight, which is not the focus. It's not the most important, but appetite is what matters most. That you're not necessarily able to fuel your body the way you normally would when you're not dealing with difficult thoughts and feelings. That's just something to watch out for. Our seventh point here is emotional regulation irritability. Now, this is a lot to do with our mood, how we're feeling, and how our mood reflects in our actions. So when we're overwhelmed, we're struggling with mental health, we're dealing with difficult things, it's hard to regulate our emotions. A lot of people might find that they're angry, that they're irritable, that in everyday social interactions, things are annoying you more than normal, and you become a little bit of a roller coaster of emotions. This is a very telltale sign that you may be struggling with dealing with some of your thoughts and feelings and mental health, because that emotional regulation is challenging and you become irritable or moody, and it's hard to balance your big feelings. And our last point here is self-care and hygiene. So we're going to talk a lot about self-care and the importance of self-care. But as I mentioned with motivation, a lot of us find that when we're mentally not feeling good, we start to noticing a decline in our thoughts, our feelings, our energy, our self-care starts to dwindle as well. So some people, when they're really, really struggling with their mental health, may find that it's really hard to get out of bed. It's really hard to go take a shower. It's really hard to brush your teeth. And those are basic hygiene things, but when we're struggling with big feelings and big mental health challenges, those can become really, really difficult. If you're having a hard time taking care of yourself, and this can be as simple, again, as I mentioned, as brushing your teeth, or it could be something as putting makeup on in the morning, or basic everyday tasks that you complete for yourself, these can become a struggle. So again, these are all just framework for you to look for of what your everyday normal looks like. If any of these things start to change or to shift, it could be a sign that you're struggling with mental health. So I say this in all of my presentations, mental health affects everyone differently. And this is so true. We are all different people with different experiences, different lived experiences. So again, these are just tools in your toolkit of things to look out for, things to think about, to notice in your behaviors, but it affects everyone differently. So now we're going to move on to practical exercises, which is my favorite part, because there's a lot of things that we can do to improve our mental health, or improve our mood, improve our thoughts and feelings. I have a couple lists of different things that can be implemented in your everyday life. These things don't have to be an hour long. These things don't have to be a huge part of your day. Even taking 5 extra minutes in your schedule to do something, an exercise, some sort of self-care, can significantly improve your mood. So the first point here of practical exercises that you can implement in your everyday life. The first is breathing and meditation exercises. I'm going to go a little bit further in depth with that in a second. But a lot of people underestimate how important your breathing can be to calm your emotions, your feelings. A lot of times we go through a lot of stresses in our everyday lives, a lot of big things that we're navigating, and we forget to breathe and ground ourselves. So taking 5 minutes to do some meditation, to do some breathing can really help you center your feelings, your thoughts, your emotions, and it can really help you kind of find focus in your day. A lot of times when I'm at the office, when I'm at the shelter, there's a lot going on. There's women in crisis in our care, and it can be very overwhelming. And taking 5 minutes to just breathe and do some meditation can be so helpful. And this applies to everyone across the board. The next is physical activity. And I think when a lot of people see this, they jump a little bit because they're like, oh, you're telling me to get a gym membership. That is not what I mean by physical activity here. Physical activity can look very different to everyone. Even just going out for a 5-minute walk outside, that is physical activity. And those are things that really help clear our minds. You don't have to go hike a mountain. You don't have to go have a gym membership, but taking 5 minutes to just move your body in a gentle way, getting outside is so helpful for your mental health. So helpful. Even if you can go for 10 minutes on a lunch break, even if you wake up and you're feeling overwhelmed, going for a walk can really change your headspace and where you're at mentally. So it doesn't have to be anything extravagant, but if we take a little bit of time to move our bodies, to get outside and to have some space to clear our heads, it can be very, very helpful. The next is journaling and reflection. Now, a lot of people may say, well, I don't really have time. I don't want to sit down in a journal with a pen and paper and write out my feelings. Journaling and reflection can look different in a lot of context. If you're someone who likes to keep notes, to write things out in a journal, that can be very helpful. But at the same time, you can also keep notes in your phone. You can also just take 5 minutes in your brain to reflect on what you're feeling. But the intention behind journaling and reflection is to take some time to really assess what you're feeling, what's going on in your life. And a lot of times, mentally, we can say, oh, I'm fine. I'm fine. But then when we start writing and we start being honest about what we're feeling, it becomes, I'm not fine. And this is what I'm struggling with. So taking, again, 5 minutes in the morning on a lunch break, to either write some things down, to do some prompts and reflections, to even just in your head think, how am I feeling today, to check in with yourself, it makes a huge difference. Then we move on to affirmations, which is something that I teach a lot of our clients and residents. And it's something that I use a lot in my everyday life. Affirmations are positive reinforcements or positive words that we can give ourselves to change our mood. And a lot of times, our mental health can consist of negative thoughts, can consist of things of feeling like you're not good enough, basically fueling your brain with negative self-talk. But when we affirm positive things and affirm good things, it can absolutely change your mood and change the course of your life. So when I wake up in the morning and I'm not looking forward to going to work and I'm tired, if I say one positive affirmation, like today is going to be a great day, and I affirm that, it really, really helps shift your mood. So affirmations can be really, really positive things, especially when we're doing a lot in our lives and there's a lot going on and there's a lot of negative. Focusing on a piece of positive can be really, really good to improve our mental health. And the last point is creative hobbies. Now, this is something that I will scream to the rooftops because having a creative hobby can be so helpful. At the shelter, we have a lot of women who like to color, who like to paint, to do some sort of creative hobby, any sort of pastime that you can take for yourself and do something to take your mind off of what you're going through in a day, your struggles, your mental health is so beneficial. And especially in the arts, arts can be very, very healing. It doesn't have to be coloring or drawing, and you don't necessarily have to have a hobby that is artistic per se, but having some sort of pastime, extracurricular, can be really good to center yourself. especially when we're dealing with heavy negative things. Having an outlet, a creative outlet to express yourself and to just kind of take your mind off things can be really beneficial. And you don't have to be Picasso and paint an amazing picture for it to be stimulating. Even just doing an adult coloring book, doing something like a puzzle. These are all creative hobbies and outlets that can be really good to take your mind off things and to improve your overall mental health. So the next thing I'm going to go through is some breathing exercises that are very useful. When I say taking 5 minutes a day to do some breathing, these are all different breathing techniques that I'm going to explain. These are things that can be done at home. They can be done at the office. They can be done at work. They can be done really anywhere. But if you start to feel like you're really trapped in some negative feelings, some negative thoughts, you're feeling overwhelmed and your mental health is kind of feeling iffy, these are some things that you can do for literally even 3 minutes to just ground yourself back into reality, back into some positive thinking. Everyone has different preferences, which is why we give out multiple breathing exercises and techniques. You can pick which one works. And honestly, it seems silly to think about doing a 3-minute breathing exercise, but when you're feeling overwhelmed, I cannot tell you and stress enough how much this can be helpful to just center you back into a neutral position. So the first is 4-7-8 breathing. It's pretty self-explanatory. You basically breathe in for 4, hold for 7, exhale for 8. So literally all we're doing is regulating our breathing. So we breathe in, 1, 2, 3, 4, we hold it for 7 seconds and then breathe out. If you do this a couple of times when you're feeling overwhelmed or you're feeling negative thoughts and emotions, this is really helpful. Super, super helpful. It just gets us in a place where we're doing mindful breathing, breathing in and out for a structured amount of time can be super helpful. The next is box breathing, which is similar in a way. These are all pretty similar in the sense that we're doing counting in breathing, but everyone has different preferences. So box breathing, we like to think of it because it makes a box. So it's 4, 4, 4, 4. So you can kind of visualize that you're making a box. And for some people, that's really helpful. And they like the visual. So again, it's whatever applies here. So all we're doing is breathing in for 4, hold your breath for 4, we exhale for 4, and then we wait 4. So again, like I mentioned, it's making that little box. When we regulate our breathing, it has such great effects for our nervous system, for mental stimulation. And again, when you're feeling really overwhelmed, you might be feeling angry, you might be feeling sad, doing some counted breathing really, really helps you calm down. Really, really helps. So again, this is just a breathe in, hold for 4, exhale for 4, and then wait for 4. And you can repeat it a couple times and it just really helps kind of slow things down. The next is deep belly breaths. And this is even easier because there's no counting involved. This is something that can be done literally anywhere. You're basically holding the base of your stomach and really thinking of breathing deep into your diaphragm. So taking a nice deep breath, and where your hands are on your stomach, you're thinking of filling your body up with air and exhaling. So there's no counting, there's nothing involved here. It's just making the mindful choice to do some deep breathing. Again, breathing is so beneficial when we're navigating big feelings, big emotions. So when you just take some time to close your eyes, hold the base of your stomach and take some deep breaths, can be really, really helpful. The last point is 5 senses breathing, which a lot of our clients at the shelter really, really like because it can be a distraction. So if you're dealing with feeling overwhelmed, feeling stressed, you don't want to be thinking about the things that are making you feel that way. So this is a great way to kind of ground yourself in other things. So we're using our 5 senses. So I tell my clients, focus on one thing you can see. So right away, we're focusing on something other than the negative thought, the negative feeling. So you can look around the room, think of one thing you see. Then the next is one thing you hear. We're using our senses. So you can listen, one thing you smell. What does the room smell like? Again, they're just like little things that can help distract from the thoughts that you may be feeling. Touch and taste. So you're basically just walking yourself through some sort of grounding, some sort of breathing, where you're not fixating on those thoughts and those feelings. It can be very, very beneficial. So again, these are just tools in your toolkit. Everyone has different preferences, but even taking a couple minutes to do those deep belly breaths like we talked about can be really, really beneficial when you're feeling overwhelmed, stressed, angry, sad, when you're dealing with your emotions. So I always throw in a case study into my presentations, just kind of an example of what this can look like, because I think it's easy for us to watch a presentation and be like, well, okay, this is great, but how do I apply this? So these are just examples of how this breathing and how mental health self-care can be implemented in just everyday life. So start with Albert. And Albert is a 45-year-old lawyer who has been feeling overwhelmed by his responsibilities at work. He finds himself upset at the office and often deals with feelings of anxiousness, which is quite common. A lot of us tend to, when we're feeling overwhelmed, when there's lots going on, when we have stress in our life, when we're dealing with family, we can start to feel anxious. After reading about coping strategies, Albert starts implementing 5-minute breathing breaks to ground himself throughout the work week. This is something I literally do. This is something that anyone can do. So by making 5 minutes in your day when you're feeling overwhelmed to do some breathing, it can help so much to ground yourself. So those big feelings of I'm anxious, I'm stressed, I have all these responsibilities, all this stuff going on at the office, taking 5 minutes to just breathe can be very helpful. So this is just an example. Then we move on to Jessica. Jessica, a 35-year-old single mom, has started to feel anxious at home. With 2 young children in her care, she finds it difficult to manage her big emotions. After talking with a counselor, she decides to start implementing box breathing throughout the day to manage her stress. This is another different example of how family, how personal relationships, how things in our close proximity can also be overwhelming. When we're dealing with issues with our family, when we're dealing with personal issues, it's easy to also feel anxious and overwhelmed. So in Jessica's example, she talked to a counselor, she talked to a friend, she decides to start implementing box breathing because it worked for her, and it's a great way for her to manage stress. So again, the big takeaway with breathing exercises, it's 5 minutes a day, even 3 minutes a day. If you start feeling overwhelmed, you start feeling stressed, something you can do to implement to ground yourself. So this is a quote that I think is important to recognize. Improving your mental health is a journey, not a destination. Healing is not linear and takes time. This is something that I think a lot of people need to hear and need to understand, that mental health, even if you have positive mental health for most of your life, will always be a journey. Happiness and a perfect life is not something that's a destination that we necessarily can reach. It's a constant thing we work on. So there may be periods of your life, period of your week, periods of your day where you're feeling really good, and that's fantastic. But it's also important to know that when we're feeling down and we're feeling low and we're struggling with our mental health, that it's a journey that we go on, and it's never going to be a one-stop fix. So when we talk about these practical exercises, when we talk about things you can do for self-care, these are tools to get you back on your path of feeling happy, feeling grounded, feeling centered, because life is very rocky that way. And when I say healing is not linear, a lot of people, when they're struggling, they're in a bad place, they think their healing journey is just going to go up like this in a straight line. But that's just not the case when it comes to mental health and when it comes to life and when it comes to challenges. Instead of being this straight line up, a lot of times it's this curvy, crazy line, because things happen, we have emotions, things come up, and it's never linear. So when you can accept that and understand that life is going to be a roller coaster sometimes, but knowing that you have the tools in your toolkit to navigate them and trusting yourself to know that here's some things that I can do to make myself feel a little bit better, that's what's important. And it takes time. It takes a lot of time. It takes consistency. So mental health is definitely a journey, not a destination, but it's just something to keep in mind, especially when we're dealing with really difficult things, really big emotions, really big challenges in our life. It can feel like it's never going to improve, but by taking small actions and a little bit of time in your everyday life to take care of yourself, those things become a lot easier. So now we're talking about offering support. So in our last presentation, I had a couple questions of people wondering, okay, I get how I can acknowledge my own struggles, but how do I be a good friend? How do I help a family member? How do I help someone who I'm seeing is struggling, or what does that even look like? So obviously the people that are close to us, we can start seeing those changes in behavior. The same way that we might have behavior changes when we're not feeling good, we see that in other people. So whether it's a family member, whether it's a daughter, whether it's a friend, someone in your life, you start noticing different changes and you're asking yourself, okay, how can I support this person? These are some very foolproof things that you probably might already know. But when it comes to helping other people, sometimes we want to do more and more and we want to just solve the problem, but that's not always how it goes. And oftentimes just offering some verbal support is really, really helpful. And this goes for ourselves as well. So the first thing is acknowledge. This can, again, go for yourself or for others. Accept the struggles and feelings of the person. So say you have a friend in your life or someone in your life who you can see their behaviors are changing, they've been isolating a bit, they seem to be really down, and you're like, I'm worried about this person. You go to talk to this person and say, hey, what's wrong? And they tell you what's wrong. And they tell you, oh, I'm really struggling with this one thing. The first thing is acknowledge, to say, okay, I hear you. Yes, these are the struggles that we're dealing with. These are the struggles that you're dealing with. These are the struggles I'm dealing with. The next is validate, which is a big, 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 big piece that we implement in the work I do at the shelter. And I think a lot of people miss this in their everyday lives for themselves and for others, is to validate those feelings, to say, yes, that's really hard. Yes, I'm going through a difficult time. I'm validating those feelings. And when we do that, when we validate and accept that that's what's happening, it can be a lot easier to manage our emotions. So you have a friend saying, I'm going through this really difficult time with my family, and you say, oh, I hear you. I'm so sorry. That's really difficult. For a lot of people, that is so helpful. A lot of friends and a lot of people in your life may not even be looking for a solution. They just need that validation that they're heard. And that can go with yourself, validating yourself that you're going through this and that your feelings are valid. It's huge. The next is to listen. And again, a lot of us can, we want to help, we want to give resources, we want to do all these things, but a lot of times listening is half the battle, and it's so helpful. So listen to what they have to say before offering advice. Give them the space to share what they're going through, and similarly, give yourself the space. Listen to what you're feeling instead of jumping to, like, my life is the worst, there's nothing I can do, yada, yada, blah, blah. It's important to listen. So when you're going to a friend, a family member who's struggling, giving them the space to just talk about it is super important. So once we've acknowledged, we've validated, we've listened, the next is where we encourage. Encourage the person to seek help and solutions. This might not come from you. I mean, as family members, as friends, a lot of times we can offer different support, but more so than trying to solve the problem, we're just encouraging them to take steps to feel better. So someone says, I'm going through this really difficult time. I don't know what to do. I'm in rock bottom. I'm really struggling. It's hopeless for me. By encouraging them and saying, actually, you deserve to feel better, and I'm here for you. And maybe think about talking to someone, encouraging them to take next steps, and encouraging yourself to take next steps. That's really important. So giving yourself and others the space to just talk about the things you're struggling with, to share, is really beneficial, because a lot of times we don't have space to do that. And that's where a lot of people start struggling with their mental health. They're not given the space to talk about what they're feeling. There's a stigma about mental health, so people aren't having conversations about what they're feeling. So it gets bottled up inside. And even just offering an ear to listen to a friend, a family member, or vice versa, can be really helpful to just get all those yucky things out and to navigate them. So now we're going to talk about some practical self-care. Again, I am someone who likes to think of these things in a realistic way. We all live busy lives. We all have a lot going on. And I think it's very unrealistic to say, go to the gym for an hour. For a lot of people, that isn't realistic. And that's okay. I think sometimes in life, there's what I like to call a toxic positivity, where people are preaching that you need to go work out for an hour, you need to have a perfect life, you need to have all this balance, you need to eat healthy. And just for a lot of us, that's not realistic. So these are, again, ways that in a busy life, in when we have families, we have responsibilities, we have commitments, these are things that you can do 5 to 10 minutes a day maximum to just find some balance. Well, the first is exercise breaks. We talked about this before. Set aside 5 to 10 minutes a day to take a walk outside. Doesn't have to be a big 1 hour long walk. You don't have to go to the gym and break your body doing all this crazy weightlifting. Taking 5 minutes to just, even to sit outside, to get some sunshine, or to take a walk, or to just clear your mind, that's practical. That's something that we can do, and that's something that can be done in your everyday life. Just taking some time, 5 minutes to move your body, really, really helpful. We talked about affirmations, and what this can look like in regular life is affirm one positive idea while getting ready in the morning. I do this genuinely every single day. I wake up, I'm tired, I'm grumpy, I don't want to go to work. And while I'm doing my makeup in the morning, I say one positive thing. Today is going to be a good day. Or whatever happens today, I'm going to be able to manage it. Doing one positive affirmation in the morning takes 10 seconds, but it just helps set the tone of your intentions for the day. And the reality is, a lot of times I'll say a positive affirmation, then I'll have a really bad day. And sometimes that's just how life works. We have a bad day, difficult things come up. But when we're affirming something positive in the morning, it just puts us in a mental space where even if something bad happens, we're ready to tackle it. We're in a good headspace, versus if you wake up in the morning, you're feeling super stressed, you're tired, and you just sit in that, in those negative feelings. If something bad comes up or you have a hard day, it affects you 10 times more and you feel a lot worse afterwards. So in the morning, even in the afternoon on a lunch break, even if you just take a couple seconds to affirm one positive thing, and this can be about your day or it could be about yourself. A lot of us struggle with negative self-talk. We tell ourselves we're not good enough. We aren't good at this. The list goes on. We all have negative self-talk that kind of comes up in our everyday life. So even affirming one positive thing about yourself, even saying, I'm a hard worker, saying that out loud and affirming that can be super boosting for your mental health and your feelings. Can really, 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 really help. And affirmations are something not a lot of us think about or acknowledge, but they're super beneficial because when you say it out loud and you say it with intention, you start to believe it. So when you really say, today is going to be a good day, or I'm going to be able to handle whatever comes my way, or I'm a hard worker, I'm a good mom, I'm a good sister, saying one positive thing like that can really change your headspace. So one positive thing in the morning or in the evening before you go to bed can be super helpful. The next is mindful eating. Put your phone away while you eat and savor the moment. I find for myself, I have a very busy schedule. I have a lot going on in my life. So it's really easy to just eat super fast, get it off my plate. I'm on my phone, I'm distracted. And again, mentally, it's not great because we're not taking breaks throughout the day to kind of manage and check in with ourselves and our feelings. So when it comes to eating, especially, and it's a bad habit that I have and a bad habit that a lot of people have, to turn your phone off. To take 5 minutes to whatever you're eating, to just eat it and to just focus on that. Because again, we have so much going on in our lives and mentally there's so much going on in our heads, and to just take some time to be able to eat some food in peace is very, very helpful. Again, these are just little pockets of peace throughout your day that can really, really help keep your mental health in check. So turning off your phone, logging off of social media for 5 minutes while you eat your lunch can be really helpful. And in turn, it's really good for your digestion too. And again, these things all affect our mind, and our bodies are very connected. So just taking some time to eat your meal in peace, in quiet, and to just focus on that is really good. And the last is night routine. Take an extra 5 minutes at night to relax before you sleep. I find myself and a lot of the people I work with, a lot of the clients we have at the shelter, obviously nighttime is a time to relax, but it doesn't always end up that way. You've had a really hard, long day. All these things are clouding up in your mind. You're dealing with these emotions. You're rushing to get to sleep. You have all these things on your plate for the next day, and nighttime becomes not a relaxing time. And get your routine of getting to sleep can be kind of hectic. So if you take an extra 5 minutes at night to relax or to do something for yourself before you go to bed, especially for our residents who have children, who have kids in the picture, they're trying to get their kids to sleep. They're trying to prep for the next day. They have so much going on that the night becomes stressful and it's not a time to relax. So this could look like taking 3 minutes to just wash your face or to take 3 minutes to read a book or to do one thing that is actually relaxing before you go to bed. Not only tremendously improves your sleep, but it so helps your mood. And sleep is one of those things where it's one of the biggest impacts to our mood, especially if we're struggling with things in our daily lives, mental health related challenges. If you're not sleeping, it becomes 12,000 times harder to deal with. So if you make a little bit of time at night, 5 minutes to do something for you. Again, this can look different for everyone, but if you make a little bit of time, super helpful. And again, these are things that take barely any time at all, but they can be so helpful to boost your mood. So this is a quote that I use a lot at the shelter, and it's a very good mantra for life. And it's, you can't control what happens to you, but you can control how you react to it. This is really, really big because, again, like I've mentioned, life can be really, really challenging, and we go through these things and these mental health challenges, and they're completely out of our control. We have no control over how people treat us. We have no control over how our workday goes. There's a lot of things in life that we don't have control over, but what we do have control over is how we react to them. So again, I always say these are tools in your toolkit. These are things that you can do so that if a difficult situation comes up, if something mentally comes up, if you're in a difficult time, you're having these big feelings, if you're struggling, we don't have control over all of these things in our life, but we have control over how we react to it. And this is the key to managing mental health and doing self-care and taking care of yourself, is knowing that, yes, I don't have control over these things in my life, but I do have control over how I react to them. I have control of how I handle them, and I have control over my life. That's a really, really big thing and important to remember. So to kind of wrap up what we've talked about here, mental health takeaways. Everyone struggles with mental health. This is a big one. I talked about it last time. I will continue to talk about it, that every single person in this planet, in this world, struggles with mental health. Because mental health, again, it's our well-being, it's our thoughts, it's our feelings, it's what's going on in our brains. Everyone struggles. And I think once we accept that everyone is going through things and everyone struggles with it, it feels a lot less scary. There's a lot of stigma still around mental health, and even though we're having conversations about it and it's improving, there's a lot of stigmas culturally that still exist, depending on where you live, what your life experiences are. A lot of families, generationally, don't talk about mental health. A lot of people will tell you, well, when my grandparents were alive, mental health, that wasn't even a thing. Even some parents don't acknowledge mental health. They don't believe in mental health. In some religions, mental health isn't a conversation that's had. And so that those stigmas kind of shape how we validate our own experiences. So if you come from a family where mental health isn't something that's talked about or believed, that in turn, yourself, you're going to feel like what you're feeling isn't real or it isn't important. And the truth is that our mental well-being is the most important, and everyone deserves to be able to talk about it. And again, there's also this stigma in mental health that if you're going through a hard time, using the word, well, I'm depressed, and then that's a big scary word for a lot of people, and in a lot of families and in different cultures, like acknowledging that you're dealing with depression or anxiety, like that's a big scary thing. But when we look at mental health as a whole, it's genuinely just your everyday well-being. So you don't have to have a disorder. You don't have to have a diagnosed depression to admit that you're struggling with things. You don't have to have a mental health disorder to have conversations about the things in your life that are difficult. So everyone struggles with mental health, and that's just something to know. The next is there are effective ways to manage your emotions. I think, again, a lot of times when we're in these really difficult times in our life and we're struggling with our mental health, it can feel like this is never going to get better. Or I have so many things that are happening to me. This is never going, like, I'm never going to be able to be happy. But there are effective ways to manage your emotions and small things you can do, like we talked about in your day, that can help manage your mood. The next, everyone deserves a happy, healthy life. This is huge. Everyone deserves to be happy and healthy. A lot of things come up. Again, we go through these challenges, and you may, again, the negative self-talk I was mentioning, like some people feel like they don't deserve to have good things, or they don't deserve to feel good, or they've been feeling so bad for so long and going through so many challenges for so long that you start to feel like, maybe I don't deserve to be happy. But I will always reiterate that everyone deserves a happy, healthy life. And the reason we do these self-care tools, the reason that we take the time to take care of ourselves, is because we all deserve to be happy and healthy. Self-care is not only important, but essential. This is huge. Yes, self-care is important, but it's essential for us to be functioning, happy people. Taking time to take care of you is hard for a lot of people, especially those who have children or who are living busy lifestyles. The self-care can start to go to the side. And it doesn't seem that important because you're like, oh, I'm fine. I have my routine. I just got to show up. I got to do what I got to do. But self-care is essential. And again, it doesn't have to look like a bunch of hours in a day doing all these things for yourself. And there's also, I think, societal expectations that self-care has to cost money. You have to go get your nails done, or you have to go get a massage, or you have to do all these things that cost money. You don't. Again, using those exercises that we talked about, those are small forms of self-care that don't cost anything, that can be really, really, really helpful. And it's essential that you take care of yourself. And the last is, you are in control of your own life. This kind of talks about the quote that we talked about together, is that, yes, while there's a lot of things we can't control in our life, we have control over how we deal with them and how we go about solutions. And a lot of times when we're struggling with mental health, it's hard to see that. It's hard to see that we have control over anything. It's hard to see that there is a light at the end of the tunnel, but we have a control over a lot of things: how we talk to ourselves, how we take care of ourselves, how we navigate situations. And a big takeaway, I mean, I've talked about practical things we can do ourselves, but if you are struggling with mental health, you can always talk to somebody. There are professionals, there are counselors, there's hotlines, there's tools that you can use that if you're really, really struggling, talk to somebody. We're not meant to keep all of those heavy feelings inside. It's impossible for one person to keep struggles inside. So never be afraid to talk to somebody, whether that's calling a helpline, whether that's making an appointment with a counselor, whether that's talking to someone you trust, a family member. It's important to have those conversations. And that kind of brings us to the end of our presentation. Your mental health matters. I will always say that. I'll always reiterate that. We have about 10 minutes, and typically we use this time to just, if you have any questions or comments, we can work through those. But that does take us to the end of the presentation.
Thank you so much, Emma. We really appreciate it. Some really good tips and good quotes. So there is one question in the chat. So can you advise like some recreational or physical activities that like the most effective ones that could help mental health? And the question is about like relaxing in the pool. Do you think like from your own experience or like from your like a professional experience, like what you have seen as the most effective recreational activities that like people can use?
Yeah, so on the topic of pool, swimming is really, really great. And it's fun for a lot of people. There really are so many different kinds of physical activity, and it depends on your ability levels. But anything that gets your heart rate up, even just a little bit, is really beneficial. So again, if you're going for a walk, your heart rate is naturally increasing. Any sort of cardio, swimming, not everyone likes running, but running, even things like playing a sport with a friend, like if you're going to throw a frisbee or anything that boosts your heart rate, because those endorphins that you get from any sort of physical activity really help manage emotions. So I don't think there's anything that's more effective over the other, but I always think that getting outside is really great, and doing anything that lifts your heart rate a little bit is awesome. And a lot of people do like gentle forms of cardio. But again, that depends on your abilities, what you have time for in a day. But I would just say any sort of gentle cardio that can get your heart rate going a little bit is always helpful.
Okay, wonderful. Thank you so much. I have a question. So in the how to offer support section of your presentation, you talk about like if someone is struggling, someone who is close to us and is coming to us and is talking about how the person is suffering. So we said like, yeah, like listen, be calm, just acknowledge the feeling of the person. Some of the things that we usually do, maybe it's a culture wise, but I personally did in the past, and I'm seeing also lots of people doing, is we are starting to talking about our own emotions, like rather than listening and just showing like, yeah, you also suffer, like look, like it's totally okay, like we have gone or we are going through the same thing. We are like, it's coming from the good place, like we are just wants to show that like we are empathizing with them. But I'm seeing in lots of social media posts recently that really it's not effective. It's not something like even the person who is suffering wants to listen, because they just wants to just like, be heard, like be valued and just like be acknowledged. So what is your thought on this?
Yeah, it's a tough one, because yes, as people, like I could be in conversation with someone's telling me about something they're struggling with, and I'm like, oh my God, me too. And as humans, I think that's our way, like you said, of empathizing, of sharing like you're not alone. And especially when it comes to friends and family, it's easy to do that. But the same way that you go to see a therapist or a counselor and they're not talking about their life, it's a space for you to just share. Sometimes people need that. And again, it's one of those things that you can gauge, because there are times where people want to feel like they're not alone. But a lot of times, again, in doing that empathizing, we don't always give the space to just listen, or we jump to try and give them advice. But a lot of people just want to be heard. They just want some quiet to be able to share what they're dealing with, and then someone to be like, oh, I hear you, I'm sorry. So it's case by case, and it's something to gauge. But when in doubt, I think just listening, it's really helpful.
Okay, thank you so much.
Yeah.
So situation-wise, evaluating the situation and the person who is telling the issue. So it's the most important one. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Is there any questions?
Yes, I have a question. You said someone that is not able to take care of himself or herself. On this concept, what does it mean?
So again, it can look a little bit different. But sometimes when we're struggling with mental health, like when I was talking about hygiene and things like that, getting out of bed in the morning, taking a shower, brushing your teeth, doing basic tasks like that can be really, really hard. And finding that ability to kind of do those things, like even eating can be like those basic things that we do to function as people. When we're struggling, sometimes that becomes really difficult. If that makes sense. Is that what you were asking?
Um, uh, Basically, many people are not very good on doing this stuff, going to shop,
Yes.
and this is part of their life, actually,
Yes.
their personality. But what you said, maybe it is different. Maybe
Mhm.
during the time it is changing, that
Mhm.
you are functioning very normally. Then after a while, you are not like that. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and again, a lot of us, because we're living different lives, like taking care of yourself can look different for everyone, right? So the same way that, say, I get up to go to work, for someone who's not working, or who has different responsibilities, who has children, like their self-care is going to look different than mine. Especially like some of the parents we have at the shelter, like their routines as a mom or as a, like it looks a lot different than maybe my routine does. But whatever you need to do to like function throughout the day, and like basic things, so you're putting your clothes on, you're brushing your teeth, like those are basic things that when you start to struggle, that becomes difficult. But you're right, it does look different for everyone based on what you have going on in your life.
Thank you.
Perfect. Is there any other question? Real good? It seems so. Thank you so much, Emma. This was really wonderful. Thank you so much. It was the second session, but really like a very complete, very comprehensive information that we can use in our daily life. Thank you so much.